All right. Yeah, we made it.
We did it.
All right, good.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is our third webinar series, which is very exciting. Before we start, I forgot to mention this in our last one, there is a Q&A box. So if anything comes up either before, during, we'll have a chance to, after Ryan and I have our talk with Ariam, we'll have a chance to kind of go over some of your questions. So feel free to fill those in whenever you feel like it. So to introduce us, for those of you who haven't seen our webinars before, we're 21 Toys. We design and manufacture toys that teach empathy, failure, creative communication in homes, classrooms, and recently in offices, as well as post-secondary institutions, which is also very exciting. This, as I mentioned, is our third webinar, and we are very, very excited, especially because it's the start of the school year. And just to introduce myself, I am the founder of 21 Toys and the designer of the Empathy Toy.
And hello, I'm Ryan. I am the education lead here at 21 Toys. It's a great place to be able to work just because, well, there's lots of reasons.
You have to say that, I'm right here.
My boss is right here, so that is important. But it's actually a wonderful learning opportunity for me as an educator myself, because there's really quite a remarkable network of educators and facilitators that are using the toy and other facilitation techniques that we have in all sorts of really cool ways. And we're always looking for new ways to engage that network and connect them to each other so that we can all learn from all that hive of interesting stuff that's being generated by that community. So this webinar is actually one of those ways of connection to that network.
Awesome. So one of the ways that we like to share the stories is with a webinar. That's because in our first year, the toys really evolved when we went to those first schools and found out all the different ways that the toys were being used. Not just in classrooms, but also in colleges and corporate environments. So some of our news, Ryan and I are actually going to Copenhagen.
Yeah.
In October, as well as Switzerland, and that's connecting with teachers around teacher training, but also to look at all the ways that empathy not only is involved in design, but actually with maker spaces. So with that, Ryan is actually going to introduce you with the person we're talking to.
Yeah, so enough about us. Like, we're not here to talk about us. We're here to talk about the cool network here. So today we're very fortunate to be joined by Ariam Mogos. So Ariam is a globally minded educator who's worked in Sierra Leone, Kenya, and South Africa with a whole bunch of very cool initiatives that we're going to hear a little bit about. She's designed educational maker spaces. She's worked with youth on innovation challenges. She's done community-based coding for girls. So Ariam, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
All right, well, we're happy that you are here with us as well. So I guess I'll just start by saying, when we first met you, you were in Sierra Leone working with a really interesting project with MIT Media Lab called Global Minimum. Would you be able to tell us a little bit more about what that initiative was all about?
Sure. So Global Minimum is an international NGO started by David Senge. He's a PhD student at the MIT Media Lab, really brilliant guy. He's also from Sierra Leone. And, so David sort of came up with this idea because there are a lot of aid organizations in Sierra Leone attempting to solve, really big development issues, but there aren't enough initiatives which actually provide youth in their communities with a platform to solve these challenges as well. So David really saw this as an opportunity to provide and create this platform for youth to design solutions to local issues in their communities that are really relevant for them. And so it started off with the National Innovation Challenge in Sierra Leone, in which a cohort of students were selected who would submit proposals for various design solutions that would range from sanitation issues to water issues to infrastructure, electricity. And those students who were selected into the program would be provided with mentorship, design thinking workshops, seed funding, and leadership development. And the goal was really to equip these skills with the innovation and leadership skills to be successful leaders of Sierra Leone. So that's how the organization started. And this program has scaled to Kenya and South Africa through Global Minimum.
That's amazing. Just from an educational point of view, what were some of the challenges for you coming into the program that you had to deal with? Because it sounds like a very ambitious project, but I'm sure there was things that were difficult about it as well.
Yeah, of course. So I think, of course, when you're just getting off the ground, you know, you're always looking for funding and you're looking for partners on the ground, and those are sort of the usual challenges that everyone faces. I think what was really interesting about this project is that the youth we're working with were coming up with these incredible solutions for issues in their community. They would come to this very competitive program and they would be ready to just start prototyping. And so that really robust design thinking process, you know, it seemed as if it was really just happening at home. It wasn't necessarily part of the program. There were 1 or 2 workshops, but it wasn't, because the youth had already designed these proposals. You know, they just wanted to start prototyping. And so one thing that we learned when we worked in Kenya, we decided to actually redesign our program a little bit in 2015, where in the past, the program has sort of been spread out over the course of a year, and we developed this 3-week intensive program. And the first week of the program was actually completely devoted to design thinking. Because a lot of the youth, even though they're creators and makers and, you know, inventors, innovators, some of them hadn't never been exposed to the design thinking process, the one that we, you know, that is, you know, been formulated by IDEO and the Stanford Design School, and, you know, so that was something that we decided to change this year, and we saw great results.
That's amazing.
Great. And actually, you brought up IDEO. So a lot of designers, my background being design as well, so many of us are taught about the role of empathy in design, even as empathy being the beginning of design. So when you guys were designing your design week, how does empathy kind of play a role in that?
Yeah, so part of why empathy was so important was the students who had come into the program were, many of them, I mean, it was a diverse cohort of students from all across Nairobi and then outside of Nairobi, but the students came in with their proposals. They knew this was a competitive program, and they were just ready to start prototyping. So some of them kind of questioned why we were making them come back to their proposals, why they weren't, you know, we were going back to almost paper prototyping, which was a little bit confusing for them because they were so confident about their proposals. And so we tried to explain to them that, well, there might be some assumptions you're making, there might be some holes in your research, and it doesn't hurt to go back and just reinvestigate before you start prototyping now that you're in this program. And so some of them weren't convinced. And using the empathy toys was fantastic because it was a catalyst to really get their buy-in. And just to give you a little bit more description about that, it was the second day of the program. The first day of the program, we had taken them out to see a community-based organization that's quite successful, that's local, just so that they could sort of interact with staff there and see the work they do, just to have a real-life example of what good design looks like, good community-based design. Mm-hmm. And so the second day of the program, you know, we picked 2 students who, great, super smart, confident, influential amongst the group, and we pulled out the empathy toys. We had one be the builder and one be the guide, and the rest of the class was able to give hints, the rest of the cohort. And it really changed the way they thought about their projects and the value of the program for them, because, you know, there was the little bickering, you know, well, you didn't tell me that, you're not telling me this, I need better instructions. You know, we gave them a time limit. They weren't able to they weren't able to build the corresponding toy in the time limit we'd given them, you know, and then the other students in the cohort were then giving them feedback. We had like a reflection session afterwards. And, you know, we asked them, so why do you think we engaged in this exercise? Why do you think we use these toys? And everyone was like, I guess I can work on my listening skills. Like, I wasn't, you know, asking enough questions. I wasn't asking the right questions. You know, I wasn't being specific enough. And then when we asked them, why do you think we are doing this in this program? Then they instantly made the connection that this process, learning how to ask better questions, learning how to listen, would really help make their innovation better. And so, like I said, it really was this catalyst for them to embrace the whole design thinking week. It really sort of just was a light bulb in their heads.
That's awesome.
That's that's amazing. We do have a photograph.
I was going to say, yeah, let's do some media. Yeah.
Let's see. I'll try to get this right. So yeah, that was so exciting for us, especially. So this is a photograph, actually. Ariam, do you want to explain what's happening in the photograph?
Yeah, so we had both of these two young men step out of the classroom, and the class worked together to create a model with the toys. Then we had them, blindfolded, come back in, and we explained the game to them. At first they were really confused, but then, we sort of just made sure to give them really specific instructions. And here they are. One is sort of has the complete model in front of him. He's feeling it out. And then this student in red, it has all these pieces, and it's up to him to figure out, based on the instruction that the other student, the guide, is giving him, to rebuild it exactly in its original form. And then their students, the other students around the table, are giving hints. So we allowed them to give up to 3 hints when they saw that both of them were struggling, which they did. And the hints helped. But even the students who were giving hints, they were giving each other feedback, because I think the first hint didn't actually help because of the way the instruction was given. So then another student was like, no, tell them like this. So even amongst the group, which was great, not just the builder and the guide, but then the other students were correcting each other because they saw the two of them were struggling, which was fantastic.
I just have a sort of a follow-up question to that. Why do you think play was such a powerful way of doing this? Because you're asking these people to like check assumptions and prove that they're wrong, basically. Is there something about play in particular that made that process maybe a little bit more palatable for the participants?
Yeah, I think because play is it's so tangible, it's so hands-on, it's so interactive. We weren't able to take the week and go into everyone. So the students worked in groups and teams, and their innovations were addressing problems in many different communities. So we weren't going to be able to go out with them to all these different communities in that 1 week and help them do that research. So this really helped us. It really helped them understand why empathy was important without necessarily, especially within the time constraints that we had. They still did that work on their own. They went out into their communities like later in the week to do more open-ended questioning and more research. But this gave us the buy-in that we needed from them immediately. Within like half an hour, which was great.
Right on. That's amazing. That's I get excited every time you tell us that story. So that's amazing. I would like to shift gears a little bit now, because I know you've got a new gig going on right now, and it'd be interesting to hear a little bit about that. So you recently started with an organization called Global Kids, and you're actually broadcasting right now from that organization in New York City. You want to tell us a little bit more about what Global Kids is all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So Global Kids is a youth development organization founded in 1989. We really focus on global citizenship, peer education, and youth leadership, and really making sure that the youth voice is heard, and equipping youth across New York City and DC with the tools to be heard. We work in over 30 schools, middle school and high school, and we serve about 1,600 youth a week. So we're reaching a lot of students. And we primarily work with underserved youth and with youth with high needs. So it can be challenging, but it's extremely rewarding when you see how far your students go in Global Kids programs.
Right. Well, let's maybe dig into some of those challenges, especially given the fact we're right at the beginning of the school year now, and you're working with students for the first time here. So what are some of those big challenges with this particular group?
So I should also say that I lead the online leadership program at Global Kids, and we focus primarily on how to use technology to support project-based learning. So we do everything from games-based learning to more, hands-on maker education with, say, Little Bits or Raspberry Pis. So our programming is quite diverse, and we're working this year mostly with middle school. And middle school is this time when most educators know, kids are going through changes, developmental changes, and there's that social emotional learning, which they haven't quite developed yet, that they, I think most of the time, have developed by the time they're in high school. So classroom management is big in middle school. It doesn't matter what middle school you're in, where, you're dealing with classroom management, just because the nature of the age group. And so the empathy toys have really come in quite handy. We've just started using them with a couple of our middle school groups. As you said, it's the start of the school year. Kids are readjusting from summer. There might be new students in the classroom. The kids aren't necessarily with their friends, and so they're adjusting to a new classroom with new kids, where there might not necessarily be these good relationships. So it's a lot in the beginning of the year, and so the empathy toys have come in very handy to help these students really work on their active listening, their collaboration and teamwork skills. And just to give you an example, there's one youth who, in a class of about 15, tends to be a bit disengaged, and he's working on that. And we pulled out the empathy toys, and everyone was really getting to the activity. And once he saw what was happening, seeing one youth build and another one guide, and the rest of the class was sort of giving hints, he immediately jumped in. He was trying to sort of guide the builder, and he was giving additional hints that were outside of the rules, but it didn't really matter because just the quick change in his engagement was huge for him. And so that was really exciting for us to see in the classroom, to see that these tools can help engage even the disengaged youth in learning, these 21st century skills that aren't really that easy to acquire, right? It takes practice. It takes a lot of practice to listen and to give constructive feedback and accept constructive feedback, especially at middle school. It's not easy. So that was really exciting. And we're hoping to use the toys all throughout the year.
Awesome.
That's great. Yeah, I was going to ask, so because it's just the beginning of the school year and you're just kind of planning that out and starting those programs, what does success look like for the end of the school year with your class? And how do you see empathy kind of being ingrained just in terms of the whole school year and how the students are working together? How do you see that kind of playing a role?
Yeah, I think so. We're really trying to make an effort to not create really dense curriculum that doesn't allow for this type of learning. Sometimes you have really robust curriculum. You've got so much, packed in there. But then when you're dealing with classroom management issues, you don't get through all of it. And I think it's important to make time for that, social emotional learning and the development of those 21st century skills that are really important. So we're going to be using the empathy toys throughout the year at different stages. And I think the progression that I would like to see over the course of the year is, better listening, better teamwork and collaboration amongst the youth. When we play the toys, I'd love to see youth ask better questions, more specific questions. And if they see that, whoever they're working with isn't getting it, they change course. So really, really learning how to take different pathways rather than thinking like, okay, this is the one pathway. If it doesn't work, I'm done. And that also includes, patience. So when they're struggling or when they're having challenges, rather than blaming each other, really being empathetic towards each other and being in each other's shoes and being much more patient with each other and trying to work it out. I think those are definitely some of the things that we'd like to see over the course of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Yeah, I know. I was going to actually just add to that. So we do have a number of design students who I believe are also watching the webinar as well. And I think, hello.
That's a shout out right there.
That is a shout out. I did look at some of the sign outs. But I think it's really exciting for designers because we're talking about 21st century skills, and design thinking was on, I think, the cover of the Harvard Business Review most recent edition.
Yeah.
So it's starting to become something that people are talking about more. So when we talk about 21st century skills, a lot of the work that we do is, it's not about filling a room with iPads. Like that's not, oh, now we're a 21st century, like we're an innovative classroom. It's really about giving kids hands-on experiences. It's about, you know, not just maker spaces, but when you were saying the idea that kids try something and then if it doesn't work, then that's it. Even we're hearing from some of the business, you know, post-secondary institutions we're working with, it's about the idea of like fixed mindset as opposed to what's being called growth mindset, which is the idea that you can practice these things and it's a muscle. It's not, well, that's the end of what I know, so now I'm done. And I think the work that you guys are doing, both with Global Minimum and then with Global Kids as well, it's really about giving kids that space to experiment and to get their hands onto these things. I don't know if Ryan wanted to add something.
Well, I was just, it's just so refreshing to hear you talk about the need to not pack the curriculum, you know, every square inch of it with content, like without having that process. And like Ilana says, the space for experimentation and exploration. All the best content in the world is going to fall on deaf and disengaged ears. So I think it's a great thing that you're doing. So that's all I'll say.
Thank you.
So we're really excited to kind of, you know, to highlight or to use a tool to talk about empathy and its role in design thinking. But right now we are just wrapping up the prototypes of our next toy, which is about teaching failure. And I know that came up in a lot of our discussions. But given your experiences and, you know, with the students that you work with as well as the staff, how would you use a toy to teach failure?
Yeah, I think a toy for failure just is so necessary and needed and would be a fantastic tool in the classroom. I think one thing I noticed in Kenya is some students that I was working with, and they also told me this afterwards, you know, after we wrapped up the program, you know, we're a little bit shy because of course they're new the first week during the design thinking week, but we're also scared to tell people what they thought. You know, they thought they might be ridiculed or they thought people wouldn't take them seriously. And I think this fear to just lay all your cards out, to see what happens, to take a chance is something we see a lot in education. And I think, you know, I think like fail fast, we've been hearing that a lot lately, but like, what does that look like? What, you know, how do we work on those skills? Because no one inherently likes to fail. Everyone wants to be successful, right? And so I think having a toy that helps us massage that muscle is really important, because I think it's more important for students to participate, to be innovative, to be creative, and to feel like they have the space in the room to do that, and not be stifled by the fear of failure. And I think that happens so much. And I think not only do students need these type of exercises and these toys to not be scared of failure, to realize you learn so much from failing. You know, if you were getting everything right all the time, that's not where innovation comes from, right? It comes from failing and learning. So I think this tool wouldn't just be great for students, but I think for educators as well. I think it's so important. Educators face a lot of pressure when it comes to, you know, their students passing or doing very well on standardized tests. When it comes to just, you know, passing regents and just if students are passing at all, you know, and I think it's if educators are equipped with the skill to create an environment for their students where it is okay to fail, we learn from failure, then it'll be easier, much easier for the students to feel that way. And I think it really does actually start with the educator. It starts with the teacher, with the facilitator in the room. I think if they feel that this is a space to fail and learn, I think students will start will learn from that. And like, we have to model that for them as educators. So I think this toy would be great for so many different stakeholders in this field, especially in education.
Yeah. Well, that's a lovely point. I love that. Your focus on educators, I think, is spot on, just because, educators, and I know from my experience in the classroom, like, they look to you as like the expert, right? And like that creates a tremendous sense of pressure to always have the answer and always be right and never fail. And like, that ultimately puts you in a little box that is a real detriment to being a creative educator. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, and just to add to the failure discussion, Ryan's not just an educator, he's got a background in music as well. And we always talk about how in music and sports, failure is called practice, but we just don't have a word for it in our education in the way that we learn. It's just failure. And the hope is to kind of reframe failure more as feedback. And anyone that's created anything, especially when we're talking about growth mindset, we're talking about design thinking, you're experimenting, you're challenging your assumptions. So much of the work that we do around empathy is recognizing that you have assumptions, and then failure is about testing those assumptions. There's a lot of overlap there. And it's really exciting to hear, both from the idea that it should be coming both, we're telling the students that, but we need to kind of practice what we're saying as well.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
And so I will leave it up if anyone has, for any of you out there, if you have any extra questions you want to throw in, now would be the time. So we'll keep an eye out for those. Let me just open that up. In the meantime, we might ask a few more questions of you, if that's all right.
We're going to practice for our prop toy, which is actually going to be your toy right after we get done with the failure toy. So let's try some of that. So I'm always interested, like, when I meet someone like you who does really cool things in education, but like, what was it that drew you to the work that you ended up in?
I think I also consider myself a creator, a maker. I make films. I also make music, and I enjoy making art. And it's really rewarding, like, when I learn from making. I think it's a really powerful process. And so, being able to support, youth, I love also working with youth. So I think supporting them to sort of acquire that confidence is, for me, I see that sort of being very important to global development. Youth development is really important. And I think youth need those tools. So I don't know. I think that's just really what led me to this type of work. Yeah.
That's an amazing avenue to get into education. Like, as a creator, I ultimately think that educators need to be creators first and foremost. So that's lovely to hear.
So we do have a few questions. So I'm going to select this one from Felipe Ocampo. He's a student at OCAD, so the Ontario College of Art and Design in Toronto. And he'd like to know how to encourage this failure and learning process in the classroom at the university level, especially with so much sense of competition.
Yeah, that's a good question.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know who wants to take a shot at that. If you want to try that, Ariam, I'm happy to try it as well.
Yeah, that's really challenging. I mean, I haven't, I think, like, at the middle school and high school level, like, competition is natural, it's very healthy, but we're really trying to promote collaboration. At the end of the day, at the university level, it's hard to say because it's really more about individual learning, I think. Mm-hmm. Or, like, I think that's more of what happens versus, in secondary education. So that's a difficult question to answer.
Well, I might jump in. So I studied design, and now we bring on board designers. So I've kind of been on it on both ends. And I would say it's really difficult because when you're in school, marks matter. Even if in design class, we've never brought on board any designers, and I've never asked them what their marks were in school. I've always wanted to see their portfolio. And so to see the process that they went through when they designed something is probably the most important thing, especially how they dealt with issues and problem solving. But that being said, if you don't get that, if you tried something, you tried a new, a more of a risky move, a more risky project, and you end up getting, you know, a lower mark, you'll lose your scholarship. And that happened to half my class. So it's a really hard balance. I can tell you when looking for work, yeah, we've never asked anyone for their marks. We've asked to see what they've done. And at the end of the day, not just the competition in terms of, you want people to encourage people to try really hard, but also the communities are quite small. And so if you can't work in a team, or if you're not a good teammate, that's what's going to get in the way of you, I think, getting the kind of opportunities and jobs you want outside of school. But yeah, I don't have as many tips within school other than just try to figure out the system.
Yeah, I would know, like, it's an excellent question, and it's a really difficult one to answer because it's so challenging just as a concept. But I would say, just to build off of what Ariam and Ilana said, first off, just realize that when you're out there looking for work, if you're in university right now, again, like, no job interview I've ever been to either has ever asked me what my grade point average was in university. So, like, know what that is. Right up front. So while you're there, create something that you're proud of. Like, build a portfolio that you'll be excited to share with someone. And like when you fail, when you're building a portfolio, that just means that's giving you direction to be able to take it in a different direction. So if you leave school with a whole bunch of things that you've created, whether it's written work or like things you created in a design program that you are really genuinely passionate and proud of, then the marks be damned. Like, yeah, you've succeeded through all the failures that allowed you to build that portfolio.
I hope that was helpful. So I'm going to jump to Jeremy Stables. Hi, Jeremy. So he asks, have you tried to relate failure to the way in which kids play video games?
That's an interesting question. So in our programs at Global Kids, our kids don't play video games. They really primarily design games. And so within our programming, there's this iterative design process where students are, you know, paper prototyping, then they're coding their games, then their peers are playing their games, because peer feedback is a huge part of our mission and peer education. And so then they take that constructive feedback and then they work on the design of their game again. So that those feedback mechanisms are well implemented in our programs, so that students don't feel like they're failing. They just feel like they're learning and improving. So yeah, I think it's, you know, we've been fairly lucky in that our students, from what I've seen, haven't really felt like failure has been an issue. It's more that they're just learning.
That's great. And Jeremy just messaged he wanted to add, so he's coming from the world of post-secondary, and he says that it's very similar to the school situation. So creating failure is dependent very much on the professor and their way of creating learning environments. If they value experimentation and failure, then the students will respond.
Absolutely.
And that's conversation about, you know, working with teachers and the facilitators.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Jeremy. Yeah.
So we got an email question. They're asking, how frequently do the students take turns in playing with the empathy toy? So I'm going to shoot that back to you.
So in the couple of sessions we've run at Global Kids, we try to make sure that we rotate the kid around, because, you know, they're in middle school. They want to touch the toys. They want to get their hands on them. They want the blindfolds on. So, you know, we'll do one game with, you know, 2 students, and then we'll do the next game with another 2 students. And so, of course, it'd be kind of nice to play the game with the same, you know, 2 students over and over again, to see how their instructions and their facilitation between the 2 of them and their building changes. And so that's one challenge, just dealing with that age group. You know, we try to sort of rotate it around. The good thing is it's the same group of youth, so they're participating every round regardless. Yeah, so that's how we kind of sort of generally have been working with our kit.
Cool.
Great. I'm just going to end it off with one final question for you, which is we're quite excited about it. But in terms of the work that you're doing, why do you think maker spaces and this idea of teaching innovation through getting kids to work with little bits and getting them to kind of get their hands dirty and creating things, why do you think that's becoming so popular now? And what gets you excited about it?
Yeah, I think why it's there that this movement is gaining so much traction is that it's becoming, education is transforming into something that is much more interest driven and not as teacher centric. And that doesn't mean that teachers and educators don't have a role, but I think educators and teachers playing like almost like a coaching role while students get to drive their own learning is really important. It's way more relevant to them. I think when learning is more relevant to you and your interests, you're just going to be more engaged. And I think creating a project and making something of meaning to you is the best way to do that. In the work that we do, when students are allowed to build their own game or their own project that's culturally relevant, that takes their community into account, that allows them to design a game the way they wanted to design it after, learning the principles of game design, allowing them to share it with their community members and their parents, their family, to show them something that they're proud of that they made. I think it's really a really powerful learning experience. And I think not just project-based learning, but problem-based learning. I think that's something we don't see as much in makerspaces, but I think we're going to start seeing where, similar to the work I did with Global Minimum, giving students the platform to address problems in their communities, things they see every day that they want to solve these problems. Maybe they don't have the agency. And I think this type of hands-on learning allows them to tackle these challenges. And I think it makes them so much more motivated to learn. So I think, I think those are just some of the reasons that this is a really powerful movement. And I think can really transform education and even our workforce too. So, yeah.
Well, we certainly hope so. That's what we're all about.
Yeah. So that wraps that up. So I want to thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to flip it to you so you can wave.
Yes. Thanks. It was amazing.
Thank you guys. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And it's like so great to be able to be a part of this community and use these type of tools. Like the empathy toys have been amazing in the work I've gotten to do over the last year and a half. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Amazing. And thank you to everyone who is watching.
Yes, thank you. And thanks for asking questions too. That was great. I love having conversations with interesting people, and you guys definitely fit the bill. So thanks for watching.
Yeah, thank you. And if you do want to find out more, we have created a fail list. If anyone does want to get updates on when the Failure Toy does launch, you can tweet or email us and just ask to be put on the, I think there's a hashtag. I believe there's hashtag fail list.
That sounds about right.
I think that sounds, very 21st century. Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope you have a great week.